法會主席。
The President. Mr. Uchiwai. Call for quorum, please.
胡志偉議員。
Mr. Wuchiwai. Thank you, President. I speak against the government's motion to adjourn proceedings. With the new chief executive being elected, we expect a new style of governance from the CE. We hope that the new approach would be implemented. But a few days ago, Carrie Lam said very clearly that in order to pass the non-binding motion on co-location, they are moving a motion to adjourn proceedings. It showed that Carrie Lam's pledge to for a new style of governance is only a slogan. And I think the slogan failed in its own way. Let's look at the logic behind this non-binding motion by the government. They said a lot of members of the public are already supporting co-location, and after lengthy consideration, the government is presenting the best solution. Yesterday, the Secretary reiterated what the Chief Executive said, and he said, according to multiple polls, the majority of the public supported the co-location arrangement at West Kowloon Terminus, and such claims were not accurate. The Democratic Party announced outcome of a poll recently. We asked whether the public would support the co-location arrangement, and the results were 50-50. A lot of people are concerned that with the co-location arrangement, one country, two systems might be jeopardized. So has the government considered that? According to the basic law, with the exception of matters of national defense, foreign affairs, and issues outside of the autonomy of Hong Kong, they could be incorporated into Annex 3 in order to be applied to Hong Kong. For the remaining matters under one country, two systems, there's no means to apply other laws in Hong Kong. The co-location arrangement invokes Article 20 of the Basic Law. Mr. Wuchiwai, I would like to remind you that this is a motion to adjourn proceedings, and next week there will be an agenda item on the motion on co-location. You should not speak at length about the implementation of co-location. I want to point out the contradictions with Articles 18 and 20 of the Basic Law, and that is the concern of the public. In recent months, the government has carried out promotion, but they failed to address such concerns. When Carrie Lam was elected, she said that for contentious issues, she would discuss them with the public in order to narrow differences, but she failed to do that. And yet she is moving a motion to adjourn proceedings for the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2017 in order to pave the way for the co-location arrangement. Apparently, it is imminent, but there is actually no urgency. The chief executive said apparently there have been a lot of discussions on co-location, and the former secretary, Professor Anthony Chung, said that the government had no specific plan, but with the new term government, we suddenly had a plan. So this is against the style of new governance, because there wasn't ample time for the public to discuss the contentious fine print of the motion. The Secretary also said the government is obliged to confirm the clearance arrangements as soon as possible so that subsequent procedures can be carried out. So is there such urgency to the government's non-binding motion? Or is the government concerned that even the pro-establishment camp might not support a binding motion? That's why they presented a non-binding motion. Regardless of the outcome of the motion, the government can still continue with the three-step process. So given the circumstances, why the urgency? We have been examining the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill for a long time. If this non-binding motion is debated later, how would the implementation of the co-location arrangement be affected? Mr. Wuchiwai, please place your mobile phone further from yourselves. According to the Secretary, the government is withdrawing the debate on the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill in favor of the motion on co-location. You are jeopardizing people's chances to speak of it. What is the urgency on the motion on co-location arrangement, which would be debated on the 25th? So Mrs. Carrie Lam certainly did not respect the Legislative Council, and this is against her pledge to improve executive-legislature relationship. We express our dissatisfaction at the government's disrespect by withdrawing this bill. We believe that the government had a number of considerations behind their decision, because if it is only done for the sake of the co-location arrangement, you could have managed it with the president earlier. We believe that the government's decision would help give weight to the pro-establishment camp's decision to amend the rules of procedures later. So by withdrawing this bill, the pro-establishment camp might have time to amend the rules of procedure.
You are now taking away the functions of the LegCo. And the government said that it will agree to Mr. James To's amendment to the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill. So in order to allay members' worry, the government must tell us clearly when the bill will be submitted again to the LegCo for scrutiny. Well, this is a rare chance, or this is a rare scenario in which all sides agree to this amendment to help those who would like to buy a new flat in place of their existing one, and that will not affect the property market. This is an agreement agreed by all three sides. Why don't you do it? Why? So, Mr. Frank Chang, you have to tell us clearly when the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill will be resubmitted to the LegCo again. Or will that be indeed a conspiracy behind, and that the bill will not be tabled in the future? Now, the harsh measures are to manage demand. Even if the government raises stamp duty, double stamp duty, etc., there are still a large volume of transactions in the property market, and some mainlanders don't mind paying a lot to buy property. And as a result, revenue of the government has been arising. But the government, members of the public, are having a difficult time to pay for their down payment. And the cost of living is getting higher. And the property market are dominating the first-hand property market. The DP supports the harsh measures of the government because we think that such harsh measures cannot be avoided if you want to buy time. But then, as what Mr. James To's amendment said, try to help the middle class to change to a larger property and cut down on the risk involved. This is a very good chance for the government to show its willingness to incorporate public opinions. When the policy address says that Carrie Lam agrees to extend this statutory limit from 6 months to 9 months, we think this is a good beginning because the government shows its willingness to incorporate members' views. But then, because of the collocation arrangement, the bill has to give way. So we think the government should understand that all eyes are on whether the new government can really implement a new style of governance. Now, I have to talk about property market and demand side management. The government is managing the demand, but when the supply has not increased so drastically, the property market will still be dominated by the developers. And conversely, the risk in the property market has risen. So the DP has been asking that in terms of the use of private and public housing, the government should increase the supply of public housing, including PRH and subsidized sales flats. The URA's role should also be reviewed. It should provide sandwich class housing so that the needs of the high income groups can be met in terms of their housing needs. The government should leverage on a credible public organization to help it with addressing housing issues. It should not be like what Carrie Lam suggested, that the government should cooperate with private developers and try to get land to provide for starter homes. Indeed, Carrie Lam, in June 2012, when she was the Secretary for Development, in responding to the issue on NENT development, she said that when all eyes were on whether there was business-government collusion in property issues, in terms of the use of land, the government must be very prudent and it must meet with public needs. So all along, the public has been expecting that since the government has been advocating for the supply of more subsidized housing, then it meets with the demands of the public, and it also shows that the government is really genuine in its determination to implement Cap 1 to 4. And the government does have the power to resume idle land and try to build public housing on it. But the government is not willing to take that route. It is now taking another approach. And then we still have the perception that there is business-government collusion. So I appeal here, Secretary and the Development Bureau should face up to that kind of perception, because public perception affects whether you can implement your policies smoothly and whether your policies will be supported by the public. And Carrie Lam said in her new style of governance, one of the important aspects is to rebuild the trust between the government and the public and to mend the rift in the society. So because of this, we are against the Secretary's motion to adjourn the proceedings, because it will damage what Carrie Lam tried to do, tried to mend the rift in the society. And it will give us the impression that the government is not regulated at all in its behavior. And we expect the new CE, Carrie Lam, will try to act in an orderly or regulated manner. But then your adjournment motion is flying in the face of such expectation. Dr. Fernando Zhang. The CCP Congress, the 19th Congress, opened, and Xi Jinping, in his work report, said that he insisted that property should be there to provide accommodation and not for speculation. And Hong Kong 01 has this viewpoint, and that is the Carrie Lam and her team should think deeply into Mr. Xi's remark. We were supposed to be debating on the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill today, and this is about imposing harsher measures so that our property market will not be overheated, there would not be too much speculation. But unfortunately, Mr. Frank Chan, when we were about to have a third reading debate on this bill, and we could have decided on the bill, well, withdrew the bill for clearing the way for the non-binding motion to be moved by the government next week. And they would like to have sufficient votes for supporting them to have co-location at West Kowloon, which is a very contentious issue. So, President, co-location, West Kowloon, for the option proposed by the government, should it take precedence over the fact that we should give a clear message to the property market so that we can curb speculation, curb the overheatedness of the market? Unfortunately, it is not for the LegCo to decide on the priorities. It was decided on by the chief executive. She said that the harsher measures, stamp duty increase, should give way, and co-location should take precedence. And many pro-establishment members were forced to sit here to listen to our speeches. And it is a waste of time. And it is a waste of our precious time. Why? Why do we have to do this? Please keep quiet, members. Why do we have to do this? Co-location is a contentious option. The XRL has sparked a lot of concerns in the community. There are divergent views, and the government has not heeded to the community's views. When the XRL was built, a lot of villagers, residents, show homes had to be cleared, and people's lives were affected. And that was then the overspending. And then they said we must have co-location arrangement. So much controversy along the way. The government said originally that we could have reached agreement. They did not rule out that there were options other than co-location. But then today they've said that there's no way, no other way. We must have co-location. They refuse to have consultation, communication. Everything has to give way. Everything has to be has to give way in face of the aging population, the wealth gap, housing, unaffordable housing, all these important livelihood issues. I'm not seeing you attach a lot of importance to these issues. Why don't you build more public housing, elderly homes, devoting more resources to take care of the disadvantaged? When we want to build elderly homes, homes for the handicapped, and the community express opposition, and then you withdrew your plan. And for the Chingshan College, well, their plan has to be shelved. Everything has to give way. You don't want any communication. Your election manifesto says connect, but your behavior is disconnect. As representatives of public opinion, those on the pro-establishment camp, don't you think you have the responsibility to try to check and balance the government, try to reflect public views? Don't let them ram something down our throat. Don't let them exploit their power. Don't let them have everything giving way to what they favor. This is not the right kind of governance style. You do have authority, but doesn't mean everything. You have all the say. You are in a certain position, that comes with certain authority. But then, well, real authority means that you have the power or you have the capability to convince people to support you. So that will end. That means that we will end up in a harmonious society. But then, in face of opposing voice, you chose to turn a deaf ear. As long as we have sufficient votes, and we will ram something down your throats. And Mr. Frank Chap, what did you say? You said that if we participate in collocation seminars organized by tertiary education institutes, there will still be more division in society, so let's not participate. Ms. Tanya Chan asked the chief executive whether she could meet with university students. Well, back then, Carrie Lam was very brave, and she went alone to the Queen's Pier to have a dialogue with the young people. How come that this kind of style of governance is nowhere to be seen today? Doesn't mean that President Xi Jinping instructed you that you should not have any communication at all? Whose instruction was it? How come that Hong Kong people could not express different views? How come that this council doesn't allow different views to be expressed? How come that there is practically no room for discussion? And as a result, we are seeing a waste of time here.
There are so many unfairness. There's so much unfairness in society. Many people are in distress. Our property market is outrageous. So I have to quote some figures. There are too many. Demographia has done this survey. For 7 years in a row, we are the most unaffordable, most expensive city to live in the world. Our living standard, our cost of living are the highest in the world. They have surveyed 400 odd cities. We are way above the others. We are way above the first runner-up in the list. In August, the price, the unit price of new residential unit was $20,000, and a small flat in Fung Tak Estate cost $4 million for a very small flat. So who can afford flats nowadays? How can our young people own their own flats? How can they have homes? And our CE is saying that doesn't matter. The harsh measures, the special stamp duty can give way. Yes, those were implemented in November last year, and what we're doing is to pass the bill, but there are amendments to the bill. Enacting the bill will send a very clear message to the market that we are not going to relent. We must not allow this property market to continue to soar. Just last week, the CE said that we could not store. We had to enact the bill ASAP. Haven't we got a consensus in this council already? We even have consensus on the amendments proposed by the BC. The government came out to say that it was okay. The Pandams as well as the pro-establishment camp have got their own amendments. They are very much similar. So everything is ready. We have an agreement, and all of a sudden, we have to give way. We may send a wrong message to the market. That doesn't matter. The property market may continue to get overheated. It doesn't matter. Co-location arrangement is important. How important it is. How many anti-residents would go all the way to West Kowloon for co-location clearance? How many of us will enjoy more convenience because we live in the mainland? Most cross-boundary commuters in Hong Kong are short-term or short-haul travelers. I don't know how you place the priorities, and I don't know why the pro-establishment camp doesn't try to lobby the government, because you have the power, you are the majority here, and this council is here to represent our people and tell the government that we think differently. Now, if you join hands and act, this government will have to succumb. You can tell the government that we will not pass your budget if you do not do this list of things, and the government will at once succumb to your pressure. So why do you have to play this game? We are wasting time, and it's totally meaningless. We can do a lot to improve the quality of life of our people. We have the poor out there. We can think, what's wrong with our current system? Yesterday, in the Complaints Division, we dealt with a case of university students from poor families. They were originally on CSSA, but as soon as they entered university, they were taken out from the payment list, and many of them have to do part-time. And we have got an alliance to help patients with uncommon diseases. And Lighthouse Project, the Lighthouse Project is a civic movement. It's excellent. Last week, the Light Home Project is a civic movement. We went to a ceremony last week, and the project has got 100 flats using efforts from the community. That's excellent, but we need more than 100 units. We need 300,000. We need more. You are all leaders in society. You have the network, you have resources, you have the contact. So why don't you do more? So many elderly persons are still scavenging for cardboards. Why don't we spend our time discussing elderly services for them? We talked about this tsunami of an aging population, and we may have to import foreign labor. Why don't we use our local resources, our local labor force properly? Given that the co-location arrangement is so controversial, why don't we sit down and talk it out, and yet the government is not doing that, is not even consulting the public. Why? Because you have the authority and you want to have all the say. As a result, we in the minority have no choice but to struggle, to put up a struggle. We have to filibuster because as soon as the item is put to the vote, we will lose. If you put yourselves in our shoes, if you feel so very strongly about injustice in society, if there is an item that is very controversial and the other party won't even discuss with you, what will you do? Do you think I want to waste time here? Do you think I don't want to better spend my time helping the people out there? So you are stuck here, so are we. What's the point? This is pointless. Mr. Felix Chung. Thank you, President. I support the adjournment motion. The reason why we support this is because the government would like to give way to make way for the collocation motion. In fact, the LP opposes this bill. Whether you do it today or defer it, we oppose the bill anyway. And the STH is checking whether the grace period for a disposal of the first property can be extended from 6 months to 9 months. I think the ideal is to extend it to 12 months to allow more time and room for property owners to buy a new flat first before the old one is disposed of. We have pointed out that many people cannot afford the 15% stamp duty. The down payment plus this 15% is too heavy a financial burden, and we have asked whether private guarantee can be granted through banks so that the cash flow will be easier for the property owners. Some members said just now that the proposal could buy time. And we understand that the Fed will announce an interest hike in December. That's very likely. And once that is done, there will be a great impact on the property market. If by then the whole situation might be different, the administration may cut the 15% and may even change the whole policy. I understand that within the government there are views that this 15% has distorted the market. That being the case, why don't we make things right? I know there is no one in the administration who dares to abolish the draconian measures or the harsh measures because they worry that the property market may suddenly boom again. But I think it is all about supply and demand. This 15% extra stamp duty has frozen the secondary market. Before the 15% stamp duty was in place, first-hand market accounted for about 10% of the total number of transactions. And then after the measures were introduced, the transactions in the primary market rose to 35%. In the past, the secondary market provided the greatest supply of flats, and you can see that the greatest the party that benefits most from this are the property developers. They are making tens of billions of dollars because of a very vibrant first-hand market. You may want to employ to increase supply drastically, but that will not be available in the short term. So you should defreeze the liberalize the secondary market so that at once supply will increase substantially. Property prices may not soar as a result. It may soar in the first couple of months, but in the long term, it is going to become steady because in the long term, supply is abundant. If we agree that this 15% has distorted the market. Some members from the other camp said that the bill should be enacted as soon as possible because it would help the people. In fact, this is not the case. You can only buy a flat if you can afford it. If you don't have any money, you can't. If you have saved up for a long time for the down payment and all of a sudden there are these harsh measures, you may have to ask for your parents to buy flats in the primary market. People can afford flats in the primary market because the property developers are giving you a remortgage. Now, people are saying that you may end up having to pay $5 million in interest to the property developer if you accept that offer. So, are these measures really friendly to the prospective home buyers? You should really consider. Does that mean that by abolishing the harsh measures, the property prices will only go up and never go down? Because this is a distorted policy. We hope that the CE can really think out of the box as she claims she can. We should not just adjourn the proceedings here. I would ask her to really give up this bill altogether so that our property market can return to the right track. Mr. Professor Joseph Lee, quorum call, please. Thank you.
李國麟議員。
Professor Joseph Lee. Thank you, President. We can now continue with the debate. The stamp duty amendment bill is being withdrawn, and the pan-democrat members objected. And even though I'm not a member of the Bills Committee, but I understand that Hong Kong people are concerned about property prices, and the government has introduced new property curbs. We have had a new term of government, so does it mean that the current government does not agree with the directions of the previous term government? I understand that one of the objectives of the bill is to dampen the exuberant property market, and it would dampen speculations as well. The previous term government decided to resort to such means to manage or control the property prices. The Secretary Frank Chan said people could buy cars instead of properties, and you could free your soul and body.
So that's the story behind this. I can't deal with the property prices. So that's why they are withdrawing this stamp duty amendment bill. So the Secretary, you said that even with the withdrawal of the bill, it will not affect the property market. And then you said that you would consider extending the statutory limit to 9 months. Then we can get this discussed later. So does it mean that this new government doesn't agree to the previous government stance? Secretary, you are overseeing both transport and housing. And Secretary, you are an expert in transport. And in the past decade, how many more roads have you built? There are so many more vehicles these days, and you are appealing to people to buy vehicles instead of flats. But you are not encouraging people to buy electric vehicles because you're increasing the tax. And you're not encouraging people to buy diesel vehicles either. But then do you have so many roads to accommodate so many vehicles? You should understand this very well. So the government does have some hidden agenda behind, because you can't deal with the property market, so you might as well withdraw the stamp duty amendment bill. I understand why you do this. Well, I'm just speculating on your motive here. I have reservation on your approach. Why? Maybe I'll share with you the reasons. So 2 weeks ago, I attended a panel meeting. When I arrived, well, 5 minutes before the meeting, I met this new government officer. Before I congratulated him, he said that, well, please go inside quickly or else the meeting will be aborted. But I thought to myself, it's not time yet. Yes, and I was instructing you to go into the meeting room. Wow, so yes, he said that I was instructing him to go in. Wow, so this is the kind of new government that we are seeing is an executive-led government, and you are instructing electoral members. I've served for over a decade as a legislator, and we usually talk to the government. We can talk to them and we would. It's our responsibility to point things out, to point out the wrongdoing of the government. But I haven't met a government officer who is trying to direct or instruct a legislator of what to do. So that's what we are seeing here too. The government officers are instructing us what to do. We will withdraw the amendment bill and let's discuss something else. And let's discuss co-location. So this is the kind of approach the new government is adopting. Now coming back to co-location arrangement, that also falls under the portfolio of the secretary. Now the secretary may be saying, now since you can't afford a flat, as pointed out by Mr. Chong Kwok Pan, and you are not imposing harsher measures, and you are asking people to buy a car instead. So going by that logic, is the secretary hinting in effect that let's have co-location as soon as possible. People do not have to drive their own cars in the future. They can take the XRL to everywhere in China, because the XRL will lead you to all places in China and not just Guangzhou. Is this the motive behind? I'm sorry that I'm really speculating the government's motive, why they are proposing to discuss this non-binding motion instead of this bill. Why did the government do that? Well, the new government officers will tell the legislators what to do. So I ask myself, so what is my duty? What have I done? What am I doing? I've been serving here for over 10 years. Should I be abiding by the instructions of the government? Well, according to the basic law, well, it is said that it is an executive-led approach, but we have three functions here at LegCo. We want to legislate, and through a rational discussion, we should enact legislation to serve Hong Kong people, to help people to lead a happy and secure life in Hong Kong. So this is the aim of any legislation. So every time, if we abide or toe the government's line, what is the LegCo here for? Are we here to serve the government or not? The legislature is here to enact legislation. The second function is to scrutinize the budget to make sure that public funds are spent prudently. This is the second thing that we have to do. And third thing, if there is error in government policy, we have to point that out. So whether it's enacting legislation, scrutinizing the budget, and pointing out mistakes in the policy of the government, we are in fact playing a check and balance role. And as legislators, we are obliged to discharge all these constitutional duties. Now, if the government withdraws the bill and we say yes, well, feel free to do whatever you please, and are we discharging our duty? This is a question that we have to ask ourselves. Now, the government office here is directing or instructing the legislative what to do. Now, last night, a colleague asked me, Joe, for the Democratic members, are we not achieving anything in the LegCo? Well, my answer is it depends. In the eyes of the government, the pan-democratic members number some 20, and 6 have already been disqualified, so we can't achieve anything. We are opposing the government all the time. But I think we have indeed achieved something too, because we are discharging our duty to monitor the government. But people may have different views on our approach to do it, filibustering. Last night, I met with the students and someone from the sector. And someone said that, well, I will not stand in the way of going back to engage in filibustering. So whether it's quorum calls, filibustering, and submitting, say, adjournment motions, 37A motions, we're in fact discharging our duty to monitor the government. Have we been able to achieve anything by doing that? Yes. I am really indeed monitoring the government. You may have reservation on my approach, but this morning I observed something very interesting. The pro-establishment members opposite, on the opposite side, are trying to use a passive approach to work together with us. Well, maybe they would like to monitor the government through a passive approach as well. So it shows that our friends on the other side are not totally towing the line of the government. Well, I'm not so sure about that, but anyway, people think that we have not achieved anything at all. Some people on the Facebook criticized us for being even of a lower caliber than the kindergarteners. But this is something that we must do because the government would like to direct us as to what we should do. You are withdrawing this bill this time. It has to do with livelihood issues and property prices. And we must point out that you are in the wrong by doing that. President, Madam Deputy, whether we have achieved anything as legislators, as long as we are playing our role to monitor the government, I think we are in fact doing something. Now, if you go by voting, we would definitely lose. But even if this is the case, we have to tell the government and the public that one of the functions of us is to monitor the government. Maybe you wouldn't heed our views. Anyway, we have spoken our minds, and we wouldn't be too mindful about the results. We have some 20 of us here. Well, let's look at the process and not the results. And we are monitoring the government. Maybe we haven't been able to achieve what we want to do, but that doesn't matter. Well, I've spoken at length, and the one thing that I want to point out is that I would not agree to the government's approach this time. I won't. All of a sudden, they came up with this proposal, and they're ignoring the legislature's duty to monitor them. The legislature has its own constitutional duty to point out the inadequacies in any laws and policies. And the government is taking the lead this time that the legislator is there to help them rather to monitor them. The new government officer that I've spoken about is making a mistake in what he did. And we still have 3 years to cooperate with you. So we should learn a lesson this time. Maybe there will still be 15-minute break after a while, and then we'll have, say, a 45-minute break for our meals. But in the process, whether we have discharged our duty, and that is to monitor the government's policy implementation, and whether we are monitoring or scrutinizing the budget. So that's why we are not supporting the adjournment, and we want to continue with our discussion. Mr. Holden Chow. Madam Deputy, yesterday, Alvin Young of Civic Party spoke, and he mentioned my name many times. And Mr. Alvin Young and other opposition camp members spoke, and they been labeling people, and they've not been talking about the truth. And I must respond to these. First, at the beginning of scrutinizing the bill, the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill at the Bills Committee stage, whether it's myself or Mr. James To, have suggested that the 6 months as the statutory time limit for disposing of the original property is too short and it should be extended to 9 months. So that has been discussed all along at the Bills Committee stage. We know that if you just allow people to dispose of their original property in 6 months, and that is really too short. So we want that to be extended so that these property owners can more easily dispose of their original property. They should be given a longer period to dispose of the original property. So whether it's James To or myself, we want to achieve the same objective through our amendments. We share the same thinking. We want to share the same objective, and that is the lessen the burden on property owners who want to get a new property. And his amendment is different from mine in that he needs the government to take an extra step before that can be done. But anyway, we want to achieve the same goal, and that is to lessen the burden on the property owners. This is a very good beginning. Just now, the government has reshuffled the business a bit. Of course, I'm very concerned about the burden of the property owners. I'm also very concerned about whether the XRL can be commissioned on time.
We always say that we have to organize our priorities according to the urgency or importance of matters. I understand that it's not an easy decision for the government to reshuffle the agenda, but as someone who is moving an amendment to the bill, I also have to weigh the respective urgency and importance of two things. Now, 95% of the XRL is completed, ready for commissioning in the third quarter of 2018. In other words, due legislative proceedings have to be completed to deal with the XRL, including the collocation arrangement. As the government said, we have to go through a 3-step process. And prior to that process, next week, there will be a government motion on collocation arrangement. There should be an open debate in this council. Why do we need an open debate? Because we all know that collocation arrangement is an important one, and therefore through an open debate in this council, the public can understand the reasons and justification for having the collocation arrangement. If the opposition camp continues to filibuster, continue to ask for quorum calls crazily, so that even the motion cannot get a chance, is it a good thing? I don't think so, because this council would like to engage ourselves in an open debate so that the public can understand the whole thing. Anything unclear about the arrangement can be made clear in this council, and I think this is very important. Reshuffling the agenda doesn't mean that the bill will be shelved. I'm of the view that the government should arrange for a slot for the stamp duty amendment bill to continue its second reading. Let's say that it will be deferred for a month. Now, if this slight reshuffling can ensure that our XRL can be commissioned as planned, and we can go through the 3-step process as planned without any delay, I think that this is an important consideration as well. Yesterday, now I had never heard such remarks in the past, but yesterday they were saying that time is of essence and the bill should be passed ASAP. Well, if you really think the time is of essence, then please stop calling for quorum once an hour. Please do not use crazy filibustering to delay our meetings. If you stop filibustering, then everything can be dealt with as planned according to our procedures and plan, and those problems referred to my members will not arise, and there is no need to stall at all. For slight reshuffling of the agenda, well, even Helena Wong took the initiative to suggest this in July last session when she felt that waterworks-related motion was more important. So Helena Wong did that. And now if the opposition camp says no to this, I think they really do not walk the talk. I think the motive is to oppose the XRL. You have to understand that they are against the XRL and any cooperation with the mainland. Mr. Eddie Chu, quorum call, please. Quorum call.
踩親佢。
周浩鼎議員請繼續。
Mr. Holden Chow, please continue. Madam Deputy, the opposition camp doesn't practice what it preaches. In effect, they are against the XRL and any form of cooperation with the mainland. On the economic front, no, and not even to facilitate transport. And if this is not serving politics, what is it? They politicize things and they ignore the interests of the people. Even though the XR is completed, they won't allow it to be commissioned. Well, in a dozen of minutes, you can reach Shenzhen, and 48 minutes you can reach Guangzhou, but that is not allowed. They are really shameless. Yesterday, Alvin Young of the Civic Party said that he couldn't understand the logic, nor can I. A couple of quorum calls in an hour, filibustering, undermining the interests of the whole community. What's the logic behind it? We could have, say, 39 million hours of traveling time. People who go to Guangdong would not need to ride a through coach anymore. They can reach Shenzhen in a dozen of minutes or so. Now, and even the students saying that if you have a criminal record, then your life will even be more brilliant. What kind of logic is this. Mr. Luk Chun Hong, Madam Chair, I do support the adjournment motion. There is no one from the opposition camp, with the exception of Eddie Ju. They asked us a number of times yesterday how come none from the pro-establishment camp had spoken. Was it because we felt that we went wrong or so on? In fact, we listened very carefully to hear their justifications, and I think what they said was really a waste of time and nonsense. They only allow the opposition camp to play with the rule of procedures and not the government. In fact, they are experts in manipulating the rule of procedures to filibuster. They do so in council sittings, in ESC meetings, in PWSC and FC meetings. Well, they say that it is very serious and the government is disrupting the proceedings of this council. There is no respect for this council, and then the whole. In fact, they have no respect for order. They have even rushed to the chairman's table once, and all pro-establishment members are here because we want the council to proceed. They Pandemics are manipulating the council. As Holden said, Alvin Young talked as if he really cared for people living in subdivided units and nano-sized flats. And they said that, well, flats are so expensive in Hong Kong, and you have to save 18 years of your salary in order to buy a flat. Yes, they claimed that they would like to support the government to find land to buy flats. But those hypocritical opposition camp, well, what about the Tung-kwong reclamation? It could provide land for more than 100,000 people. But because of filibustering last year, the whole thing could only be discussed this year, a delay of 4 months. And also in Tai Po, a similar case. And also Guangzhou. Well, the grassroots would like to be properly accommodated, and shouldn't it be something we take care of? And of course, for the harsh measures, of course, they may help those who want to buy flats and to upgrade their homes. Now, in fact, the measures are already in place. It's been in place for half a year. Of course, there are amendments to the bill to improve it. We support the bill, but please don't speak as if the bill would disappear if we delay its enactment for a while. Please do not scare people. Now, I won't criticize you if you talked about efficiency. I hope you will adopt the same standard. In this council, we must be rational, we must be efficient, there should be no stalling. The whole world has got XRLs, Japan, the UK, Europe, and even the US. Our country is the most successful in building XRLs, and we have already 20,000 kilometers of tracks, and we're going to expand it to 40,000 kilometers in the country. Now they talk about public opinion. Well, there are lots of surveys. The opposition camp like to quote the findings of the opinion poll by Mr. Robert Chung. In fact, according to that poll, 53% of the respondents supported the co-location arrangement. And then the opposition camp was a bit puzzled. And then political party talked about the political party who was involved in the stapler incident, it organized its own poll. Well, even this political party involved in that stapling incident only arrived at 40% support. And does such a political party have any credibility? Well, they really, their arguments are very flimsy, and Mr. Kenneth Leung keeps talking about political mission. People say that for important things you should say them 3 times. I think he said the term more than 3 times. Well, with the XRL, we can encourage flow of people, and we can boost the economy. So I think they just want to demonize the exile. They would like to alienate Hong Kong from the country so that we cannot share the economic benefits in the rise of the country. So that when people cannot share the fruits of prosperity of the mainland, then people with more grievances, then they can have more political mileage. For the childish members, well, the one who loved playing with the national flag, he didn't even know the rules of procedure. I'm sorry, my son is also a primary school kid.
Some members do not even understand Rule 40 brackets 2. So I do not know how to describe these people. A lot of opposition members talked about Carrie Lam's new style of governance. At the beginning, I did not quite understand it. I did not know why the chief executive had to move a non-binding motion. You know, she could bring the matter to the central government, but eventually I understood the point. The point is to involve the public, and we are proxies of the public as well. We should discuss arguments on both sides at LegCo, and this is an important part to public involvement in policy making. In the 3-step process, in step 1, we have to reach a tenancy agreement at West Kowloon Terminus with the central government, and number 2 with the MPC Standing Committee. And before these 2 steps, it's very right to move a non-binding motion at LegCo. For past chief executives, they would sit in front of the president, and now Carrie Lam is very humble and she decided to take up a seat next to the president. So this shows her humbleness. So this is a mission by some radical students. Of course, it's good for the government to consult, but we should not jeopardize the project of XRL where public consensus has been forged. We have to gauge our priorities, and we have a juggling act at LegCo. If you are going to criticize someone, you can always find excuses. The opposition camp would say that they would not approve of Carrie Lam's decision. But there are no what-ifs in life. So this is certainly refusing to talk, as Dr. Fernando Cheung suggested. It was a wrong allegation. For this motion to adjourn further proceedings on the bill, I would support the government's amendments. But the motion to adjourn this time would not carry much negative impact, and as I said, we need to juggle our priorities. XRL is equally important. The commissioning of XRL will bring about convenience, and this is equally important. If you have been involved in district work, you would know that even slight delays in bus or railway service would lead to criticisms of the government or even legislators. If we have delay in the commissioning of XRL, if we fail to implement co-location, if our XRL becomes a useless or slow railway because of the failure to implement co-location, would the opposition can be held responsible? Perhaps they would be happy to see that happen. They would politicize everything and demonize everything, and I hope the public can see that. Thank you very much. Ms. Eddie Xu. Thank you very much, Deputy. I think the atmosphere here today is getting better. From what Mr. Wang Ting-kwong said yesterday, within the pro-establishment camp, there are different camps. So I like to, well, we failed to grasp what you were thinking. Apart from the DAB and FTU, I think other members can speak out more. Madam Deputy, this discussion is not so easy to grasp for the general public who might be watching on TV. I will shortly explain why myself and other members have made quorum calls. We want the public to understand what is going on. This is a rare move by the government. In July, Mr. Frank Chen said they had to scrutinize this bill as soon as possible. And in July, Madam Deputy, you said that the stamp duty amendment bill was very important and there was no time to waste. For people who have been following our debate these 2 days, they expected us to enter committee stage and we would deal with the amendments moved by Mr. James O or Mr. Oden Chow, and the period for disposal of property would be extended from 6 months to 9. Madam Deputy, this is a negative vetting process. For other bills in the past, it would be justifiable for the government to withdraw them if they did not agree with the CSAs. But in a negative vetting process, the government is obliged to have the bill debated and voted on at LegCo as soon as possible, or else the executive would be abusing the negative vetting arrangement. There are some things we want the public to know. First of all, if the pro-establishment camp places an emphasis on livelihood issues. Why don't you allow the CSA debate to continue? I would say that this is an anomaly, and as Mr. Holden Chow and Michael Look said, we would explain the reason behind such abnormalities. And that's why we talked about balancing or gauging the priorities. I think we really need to know where our priorities lie. Should the bill and amendments be passed, this is the first thing we must consider. And secondly, the XLL, which is apparently of higher priority. So I need to explain my priorities to my voters. Yesterday, the CPC Chairman Xi Jinping said in the 19th plenary meeting that there were two areas of focus for the CPG. They have to grasp the the total control over Macau and Hong Kong based on the basic law, and such power should be should combine with the power of autonomy by the special administrative region. So that was the view of Chairman Xi. And number two, they could not just clone the political approach of other countries. They talked about a combination of power between legislature, executive, and judiciary. So if we talk about priorities, I think the pro-establishment camp can offer their views. With regards to President Xi's claims yesterday and the tripartite collaboration he mentioned, do you feel that XLL is more important than the stamp duty amendment bill, and that it is more important than the plan to extend the disposal period from 6 months to 9? So that apparently is the logic. The central government has been talking about this tripartite cooperation, so LegCo should also cooperate. Yesterday, the president had a debate with Dr. Cheng Shong-tai and Mr. Michael Look accused Dr. Cheng of not knowing the Chinese language. As you know, the debate we have right now is a prelude to the XLL debate. Even though the president has no power on the motion moved without notice by the government, even though the president is not here, I can sense that he is biased towards the government. When we look at the government motion next week, whenever members file motions, the normal standard is whether the motion is legitimate. With that issue, if you have an opinion on the agenda next week, you can say it next week. The 15-minute time slot is not for this purpose. Now let me come back to the topic. The President just showed Hong Kong people what is meant by the collaboration of the three powers. So is this really endorsed by the Hong Kong public? I really want to talk about the express rail link. I want to go back to a more fundamental question. And that is, how do we gauge our priorities and what our stance is for each issue? In this debate, I like to have a discussion with members who are yet to speak. For example, those from the Liberal Party. I like what I heard from Mr. Felix Chung. He said he wasn't thinking about political motives or the Beijing's intention to push forward the XLL. That was not what he said. He said he had a wild idea, and that is, after this government motion is adjourned, the entire amendment would be scrapped and there will not be any more property curbs.
I wonder what other members think. We haven't yet taken a vote. Maybe you can try to consider the issue from the perspective of the middle class. Whether you expect the new government will shelve the bill altogether, or they would shelve the bill altogether. Does it mean that they will refund all the money to the property owners, or what? We have to maybe ask the legal advisor. Or is it the case that for the middle class groups, they want us to set priorities, and they want the that period to be extended from 6 months to 9 months? If we exclude DAB and FTU, maybe we have enough votes to vote down on the adjournment motion. We can still go back to the committee stage to continue our discussion on the stamp duty amendment bill. And the discussion of this bill should be in line with the stance of members here who claim they represent the middle income groups. They also emphasize that they should do concrete work. So when you vote, please consider this. Don't think that if I vote in favor of the adjournment motion, then the world is going to fall apart. Please really bear in mind your electors, and you try to make the right priorities. Madam Deputy. The Democratic camp has spelled out a stance clearly. I don't like the pro-establishment camp style. And they always think that the other side is in the wrong and we are in the right. They never would like to have a debate with us because they have a closed mind. They just charge forward. And Mr. Michael Look said that we're going to have a debate next week and we should listen to each other. Say, for example, Madam Deputy, I'll just say one word about co-location arrangement. You were always saying that we should be. It doesn't mean that if we don't have co-location, then the railway will be of no good use at all. Well, the concern group is in support of co-location. The question is where it should be placed. Should it be placed in the mainland, in Shenzhen, or in Hong Kong? I don't think this is a meaningless discussion, or this point should not be debated upon. We do have our own stance. So, for the government motion next week, it is inappropriate. It hasn't consulted the public. It even refuses to talk to the students. So maybe next week we should focus our discussion on where the co-location arrangement should be placed, in Hong Kong or in the mainland. We are very clear on that point. And in terms of setting priorities, I think the Democratic camp has spelled out our stance clearly, and we don't think the collaboration of the three powers as suggested by President Xi is right. We want separation of powers. We want an enhanced legislature because the executive authorities now have too much power. We should strengthen the legislature, and it can better represent the public, defend our own interest. We should have a real democracy. We should not have the Iranian or mainland style of democracy. Now that can represent the views of the majority. So in terms of setting priorities, we are against the co-location arrangement as proposed by the government, and also oppose the amendment of rules of procedure by the establishment camp. Mr. Abraham Shek.
I rise to speak on the invitation of the challenge.
Sorry, Mr. Shek, call for quorum.
請議員返回。
Members, please return to your seats. Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh.
謝禮謙議員請繼續。
Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh.
First, I'd like to declare that I am an independent board member of the MTR. It's not important, possibly it's not related to this subject that under discussion, but to be on the safe side, anything can happen with our opposition members. Madam President, having listened to all the debates over the last 2 days, I have yet to understand why the pan-democratic colleagues are so much against this present motion. Firstly, they haven't really discussed the two main issues. What exactly is their opposition that giving priority to the COD, the West Kowloon issue, and that of the importance of stamp duty? And this is exactly what they have. They take this into an argument that this is against the good practice of legislative chamber. Firstly, the government also, on the other hand, failed to convince, it's not important to convince the pan-democratic colleagues, but they are there to convince Hong Kong why they're taking this motion now and ask us to discuss it. Firstly, we have spent $84 billion to build a station, and that's not the end of it. Without its operation, every day we will be spending millions and millions of dollars wasting public money. This itself is a priority. Secondly, the stamp duty ordinance itself is really a bad bill, a bad ordinance, because it's received money for no good reason. And thirdly, they are not losing any money in terms of the delay, because the government already receiving all the money, but it's not in their pocket yet. So I think basically there's no argument on all this. A number of the pan-democratic colleagues have made a fuss over the administration's abrupt decision to suspend the deliberation of Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2017. As I said, itself is a bad bill. After the amendment bill had passed through its second reading and give way to a motion to be moved on 25th October, next Wednesday, on taking forward the follow-up task of co-location arrangement at the West Kowloon station of Guangzhou-Shenzhen Hong Kong Express Rail Link, saying that the decision would give a wrong signal and confuse the people about the administration's determination in containing soaring property prices. My God, what are you all saying? You were the one with your support from the opposition in support of this bill. You are the ones that have pushed your voters to pay government billions and billions of dollars, which I'll go through it. And now you say that you wanted to do it immediately and to right the wrong, that you have made a wrong decision in supporting the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill, believing that it can contain speculation in property prices. The answer is no. It's no. I will prove this. Now, to me, the deferral, for what it's worth, is really nothing. Makes no big difference, Mr. Secretary, as far as our housing rules is concerned, and you are responsible for that. For the market has already been used to the harsh measures, the 4 Ds. 4 D 死咗 D SSD, BSD, DSD, and NRSD. That's the lasting effect of those D on curbing price hike keep waning. It's actually on the decrease. The property prices continue to going wild, and the ordinary potential home purchasers still find it extremely difficult to purchase a home for living in peace and contentment. Madam President, for a person, a legislative member representing functional constituency in real estate to say things like this is quite astounding. I should be one to say, yes, go ahead and make more Ds, because all the Ds, the stamp duties, benefited two parties, the government in its collection of revenues, and secondly, helping the developers to sell all the properties that they can build, which I'll come back to this issue. So again, Mr. Secretary, you might be new on the job, but government is not new. The government is a continual process. Just like yesterday, the Chief Secretary was saying, oh, this government. There's no this government and that government. The government is SAR government in service of the people of Hong Kong. We might have a difference in the head of the government, and God bless Kerry. According to the Rating and Valuation Department, the price hike of residential properties, Mr. Secretary, just for your information, has gone up from 163.7 in November 2017, when the first harsh measure, SSD, introduced, to increase up to 339 in August 2017. Honorable member, you realize what increase you have seen? From 160 index, from 163 to going up to 339. You supported the bill, Mr. Opposition. This representing a 207% increase. Meanwhile, the price index of residential property has risen from 17 consecutive months with all this third, fourth stamp duties. The accumulated rate of increase over this period was 25%, Madam President. These figures clearly reveal that the latest, they say, NRSD, introduced last November by our famous Mr. C.Y. Leung, and the other treaties have failed to meet the administration's expectation to stop the upward spiral of residential property prices. Now you think of whatever go, you're not helping it. As the new administration remains adamant to the demand side of the 4Ds, this is the wrong concept, and they continue to rectify it. With no decent progress in increasing land supply, passing the amendment bill today or next month will not bring any change to the price trend of residential properties, as home purchases are facing an inelastic supply. In case you do not understand what inelastic supply, go to Samuelson, the Foundations of Economics. They will tell you more. The suspension only delayed the materialization of the NRSD, the fourth Stamp Duty Act revenue, from law firms, as I have to say, from law firms' pocket into the government's coffer. What they have lost probably is the interest. But what they would have lost if they don't implement the West Kowloon terminal, they would have lost billions of dollars. What is more important? West Kowloon is more important than this bad Stamp Duty Act. Tell them, why are you so mean with the facts and so mean with the truth? Government must speak the truth. On the other hand, the SAR government, so-called demand-side management, actually does not live up to its name. In fact, the SAR government's successive interferences have increased demand for first-hand residential properties, benefiting developers as the 4Ds have made the secondary market lackluster by discouraging property owners to dispose of their properties, squeezing supply of second-hand properties. I've said this since 2010. In 2010, Acting Madam President, the number of primary sale and secondary sale was 13,000 and 122,000 respectively for secondary. In 2016, you know what's the figure? The 2016, the primary sale increased for first hand to 16,000. While the secondary sale dropped from 122,000 yearly to 37,000. Oh, where are the supply? The demand is still there. That's why you see all the prices rise. I've said this time and time again. I've tried to convince the opposition that this is not the case, that the government cheating you. It's just like they're telling a lie. They believe in the lie, and now you continue to follow them and believe in the lie. Go ahead and pass more SSD. That's okay, and more stamp duties amendment. Madam President, it's really hard not to get uptight about all this, knowing that the government is so stupid and the opposition supposed to be watching the government becomes partner of crime. Thank you all. There was an increasing proportion of primary sales to annual total residential properties transactions, from 10% in 2010 to 31% in 2016. Those are hard facts. But the Honourable Secretary failed to present these figures because he's mean with the truth and he's mean with the facts, which I have now tried to take out from all the years that I have been a member of this legislature. While the secondary sales market have decreased from 90% of total throughput to 69% during the same period, Madam Acting President, while the administration reiterates that the 4Ds are so imperative to help to stabilize an overheated property market, where is that? During the exceptional period of demand-supply mismatch, it seems that the administration have another consideration in its mind, the financial implications of the 4Ds. Every time when the price went up, their tendering sale price have even gone up new heights. The government received an additional revenue of $50 billion from stamp duty in 2010 to 2011, $50 billion. And did they spend on building houses? And did they spend on the aged, elderly, and the youth? I leave the people of Hong Kong to think about this. And the latest statistics of 2017, 2016 to 2017 show that the revenue from stamp duty was as high as $61 billion, which means that the government collects tens of billions of dollars of stamp duty every year. Therefore, even if the passage of the amendment bill will be deferred for a month or two, I don't doubt the administration's sincerity to pass the amendment bill. Be rest assured that they will like you to pass so that the money will go to their pocket instead of having in the law firm. Madam President, I don't doubt the administration's sincerity to pass the amendment bill, as I said earlier. After all, it is a very lucrative source of income besides its high land rights policy. And the new CE has emphasized lately that the new administration have no intention of withdrawing the 4Ds. As I am not here to defend the administration's abrupt decision to change the council's meeting, but I am supporting it at the 11th hour. According to the design of the basic law, Madam President, the political structure implemented in the HKSAR is basically an executive-led system headed by the chief executive. I share the President's view that by virtue of 40 bracket 4 of the rules of procedures, the administration has the right, explain your position, to proceed its agenda as it wishes, and its decision, however abrupt and unpredictable, was not ultra-virus, as painted by our friends across the sides. The Pan-Democrat says this was a political decision. Was it? It really was a political decision, given it contained every ingredient required to make it political. Its controversy issues concern one country, two systems. An anti-China sentiment of some people of Hong Kong in recent years, the lack of trust between the executive and opposition, and so a rushed decision at the last minute by the CE left a strong perception that it was a political decision. Nothing wrong with that. In politics, perception is everything. Nevertheless, entertaining the saying that stamp duty is more important than the co-location arrangement is like comparing an apple with a lan chang or lan gum, which will not lead to any meaningful discussion and really not worth the time we spend here, as both issues concern the livelihood of people and an economic bearing of Hong Kong economy. We're losing more money in not operating West Kowloon than passing this stamp duty. They are important issues. Madam President, the CE.
你嘅發言時間到啦。
Your time's up. Mr. Charles Mok. Madam President, the President has been talking about politics.